All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Macro Perspective. And today we have a special guest with us yet again. Um, First time for us with Dominic Matteo. And Dom, I I always feel like I can never do it justice when it comes to introducing people. And I know that you have an interesting kind of story at what led you into kind of health coaching as a whole. And I would love to kind of hear like just kind of that origin story a little bit and maybe like your elevator pitch version of that so people can kind of get to know a little bit about you.
Yeah, the elevator pitch is that's a good addition there. Because my story is kind of it's long. I mean, there's quite many layers to it. Kind of shorten things up a little bit. I had an interesting childhood. Growing up, I grew up with my dad. My mom suffered from some mental illness, so it was me and my father most of the time. I was kind of a chubby kid growing up, which grew into me being a very obese kid, and over time that kind of got worse. Um, so I'm gonna skip all of this stuff to, I'm probably in my 20s. I am in my 20s. I played football through college, through my sophomore year. Um, Stopped playing football, stopped being active, put on a lot of weight. Um, I had gotten up to, I was graduated, I was working, I was eating out a lot, not taking care of myself, drinking a lot, dealing with stuff. And I'd gotten up to about 300 plus pounds. I stopped weighing myself once I hit 300 pounds. Um, yeah, so I was probably about 220. And, I was playing rugby at the time, men's league rugby, and it was miserable for me because I could barely last the half. And so I was training to get fit for rugby. Um, I was going to the gym and doing stuff. Wasn't paying attention to my food at all yet. I didn't register. I was thinking like, I just gotta run around and do stuff. Um, One of my best friends had a pulmonary embolism and passed away. The day that we found out that my wife and I found out that we were having a son, and so that day kind of clicked for me, and I
Mm.
decided that I didn't want my kids ever to see me unhealthy, and I didn't want to set that example for them. And so at that point, I had, I was doing an at-home workout program. I had started dialing in my nutrition, and I lost 120 pounds. I'd done some different things, and in that journey, people had kind of noticed, hey, what are you doing? People started asking me advice and doing stuff. So I went back to school. I did some education around nutrition, coaching. I started a little side business, started coaching people, and it kind of grew from there. My passion was like, hey, I really want to do this. I was a systems analyst at a Fortune 100 company at the time, and really wanted to coach full time. And so I saw PN was hiring. I did not apply. About a year later, I got my resume together. About a year later, I was like, you know what? I don't care. I sent in my resume. I made some contacts there. I followed up. About 6 months out of the blue, I got a call saying, "Hey, we're hiring. You're at the top of our list. We'd like to interview you." So um, that's the shortest version of this story I can give you. Lightning struck. I ended up getting. I put in my 2 weeks notice right there after they told me they wanted to hire me, and I haven't looked back. So that was in 2011. So here I am, all
Wow.
these years later. So no joke.
Wow.
13 years with them? That's crazy. I didn't realize it was that
Yeah,
long of a tenure.
yeah, yep.
Dang, Dom. First off, I just want to say I know there was a quick story, but like the deep pain that you felt in that lightning moment to really change the trajectory of your life. I mean, it's no easy task to probably switch from a Fortune 100 company, probably something you wanted to do or something that was,
I
very
would have
beneficial at
retired
the
from
time.
there.
Yeah.
I would not have left. I would have retired from there. People don't leave that company. Um, Everything about it
Yeah.
is awesome. But it was, like you said, lightning struck. It was one of these opportunities I wasn't going to pass up.
I want to talk about
Hmm.
that. I mean, you had such a, phenomenal journey, you woke up, looked at your health, and said, "Hey, I'm gonna lose 120 pounds," and now you're coaching it. Tell us about like what it's like being a coach, but having been on the other side. Marcos and I can relate to some of our patients and clients, but I can't relate to that extent. You know what I'm saying? I've helped people lose over 100 pounds. I can't relate to them, just because I've never been there. But you can. I mean, can you explain how that really? I don't know, that gives you kind of an understanding of where people are coming from today, especially in our landscape with obesity and things like this.
Yeah, I tend to makes it a little bit easier to have empathy. It makes it easier. And it kind of skews my view to some extent because I look at folks that are struggling with obesity and to, for better or for worse, and it's not always correct, but like the first thing, and I have to be mindful of this, the first thing that pops into my mind is there's a person who struggles with managing emotions, right? Because that was kind of my experience. Like I didn't have the maturity and the skill set to be able to manage my emotions and to manage other things in my life. And so food was kind of a thing. Oddly enough, and everybody's got a different angle at it. Oddly enough, for me personally, I've always been a pretty competitive person, and I kind of like the spotlight, if you will. So even when I was a 300-pound guy, it was like, I would order like a pizza and I'd tell them not to cut it, and I just, I'd like roll it up like a taquito so I could eat it. Because people got a kick out of that, right? It was always like about the story. I was the guy who was like, oh, okay. Like, in college, it was like, you can bong a beer. Like, I have a funnel, I can bong 6 beers faster than you can bong one, right? So it was a matter of kind of changing where that energy was going. Like, that stuff is detrimental, not important. And so I had to change my perspective on, like, what is important to me, because I didn't have those values at that time.
That's It's funny because as
So,
you're giving me the lightning version, Dom, like I had a couple like thoughts go in my head. One of them is a social media guy who like kind of had the same kind of eye-opening moment, and now he has like the low-cal hack recipes page, you know what I mean? And I think there's a few of them actually that come to mind, and they had like that pivotal moment, and was like, and obviously Seamus doesn't have kids, but I do. Um, and like you turning it around for like the health of your soon to be son, like, I mean, do you feel like when you're coaching people now, like what is a moment like that or something that you get out of them in like a intake call? I know you maybe don't coach as many people like you used to, but like what is something that you look for to like know if that person's truly like invested in actually doing it? Because I think a lot of people say they're ready, but they're really not.
yeah, so it's always, that's a hard, one of the things, and you've been through classes with me. One of the things I really hammer is really developing kind of this wellness vision up front. That's the foundation, and that is the compass. And it's not just knowing your why. It's just kind of try to figure out the why with people. And a lot of the times, it's not really motivating. They give you answers that they think they should be saying versus what's really important. So for me, it's really developing that vision of wellness, which is like a mission statement, right? Like a company has. It's not things that you can check off. They're not goals. You can't say done. It's how does my life, how do I want my life to look? How do I want to be living? What would I be doing? Who's with me? How do I feel? What is, and that brings all the values and the important things in. So for me, it's always coming back to that and going, are we making decisions that are in alignment with this thing? You know, um, if someone tells me in their vision, I'm living healthy and eating a variety of foods that I enjoy, and then they come to me one day and they're like, hey, my neighbor's doing the cabbage soup diet. I think I want to try that. The question comes back to, how does this align with your vision of wellness? You told me you want to live healthy and enjoy a variety of foods. Does this align? And in some cases it doesn't. And then it's like, maybe this isn't the best choice for me. And so what that does is that eliminates those things where maybe you're going down the path and they're not doing well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love that. Like, it's not just these whys, because I totally understand you. I know Marcos and I have felt this where people have given us their whys. They're like, "Oh, I want to look good. I just want to be there for my kids." But it's like a superficial answer. It's not
Yep.
truly something that's deeply felt or deeply, actually orchestrated. So I have to go like deeper, it sounds like. And I love the fact that you call them out too on with their why. What does that look like in reality when new things come along? And I have a question for you because I know you've been in this coaching world. Like I was still in high school wrestling, when you got into the coaching world. I didn't start my degree until like 2013, but I mean, I was in the know of nutrition and fitness because that was kind of my area. But you've been coaching, you had a great tenure. Tell us about your time coaching. Like, what have you seen the trends that were crazy to now? And now I feel like the biggest craze, Marcos and I talk about this. I mean, we talk about this like every day, but like the GLP-1s, the way the fitness and the nutrition and the pharmaceutical industry now. Can you kind of speak over a general broad line of kind of like the timeline that you've seen with your
Oh,
coaching?
I mean, I've seen it all. I've seen quite a bit. I mean, I could say it all. I could see it all, but I wouldn't say I've absolutely seen it all. But a good variety, right? It was like, think about, going back to, it was like, uh, in the late 2000s, it was things like, Atkins was kind of there. The zone diet was a big deal with a lot of the CrossFitters. Um, and then that kind of shifted to paleo. Then that kind of went to like low carb, and then the fasting. Like that's when the intermittent fasting came up. With lean gains. That was one that was kind of like 2011, 2012. That was kind of peak lean gains. People were doing that specific style. Um, I've seen them go through, then it was like, oh, now it's keto. It's like, it's a lot of the same stuff that's repackaged and marketed in a different fashion, right? So that stuff was there. Um, then you started seeing a lot more of the plant-based things start coming up, especially that came up and then kind of went away. Then it came back again. Keto's gone through in and out of versions. Paleo has been in and out, and now it seems to be, and then the intuitive eating thing, the pendulum kind of swung. Um, and we're still seeing some of that where people went from like, yeah, we've got to count calories and macros to like, nope, got to be all be intuitive eating. Counting is bad, measuring is bad, and again, the biggest observation, kind of overarching in all of that, just what I've noticed is that it's like knee jerk reaction, it's overcorrection in a lot of the case, right? People miss the nuance. People miss the right answer is probably in a blend of these things. It's in the middle. But people want to be in a camp. They're like, I'm this, I'm that, and it's like, but that doesn't work for everybody. Um, and so I always kind of look at it like, we have piles and piles of studies that show that the only thing that matters is consistently doing the right thing for your whatever you choose to do over time. And then if you zoom that out, it's like, if we're looking at just overall intake and macros, it's like, if you're getting the proper amount of protein, the other macros don't matter, right? As long as you're getting the appropriate amount and you're doing this over time, it doesn't matter. That's why you have all these diets, and you always have camps of people that are like, this works, because they're actually doing the thing consistently over time. That's the most important part, right? Go
Yeah.
look at go to the bookstore. You'll find 300 different named diet books, right? And they all work for the people that follow them. There's like, right? And it's like the Devil's Diet, Jesus Diet. You've got skinny bits. You got French people don't get fat. Seriously, the cookie
Uh,
diet, the cookie diet, the Twinkie diet, right? Paleo, all the ones,
yeah.
paleo, vegan, carnivore. If you adhere to the things, they all, like, I always say same but different. I use this hashtag a lot. And the things that are kind of coherent across all of these is really eating appropriate portions for yourself, even if they don't want to admit it, eating appropriate
Yeah.
portions consistently over time. Um,
Yeah.
and that means that the person needs to be able to do those things consistently over time, you know?
Yeah. I have a follow up real quick, Marcos, before you ask your question. I've always felt that in our, I think in the field coaching, especially kind of just in the dynamic of America right now, whenever you think diet, it's always like fat
Negative.
loss related.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always negative fat loss related or like weight loss negative. Or if it's like, it's even, and I'm not trying to dock on any of these, but even if it's like performance related, I've really just felt that like, I'm just wondering if you could just eat, like, if people can just learn how to just eat to live, you know what I'm saying? Like just eat to like live a basic life. And I think that's where like PN kind of comes in, where it's just like
Mhm.
teaching people normal, or like really like it's right there in front of you. These habits are right there in front of you. You just need a little bit of education.
Right.
And I feel like that's where like PN really comes in well. It's like it takes like a really agnostic approach where it understands that all these platforms are out there, but it's like this is just how you do it for yourself. Whether you want to modulate that to fat loss or to performance or whatever you want to
Yep.
do, you have the ability. I just feel like it's always been that connotation, you know?
No, you're not wrong. I'd agree. It's like people think diet and they think fat loss, right? Or there's a negative thing like the word diet, and it's like diet is just what you're eating, right? This is what my
Yeah,
diet looks like. Whether
yeah.
I'm trying to gain muscle, lose fat, have be there for performance. Um, if I'm a mother that's recently had a child and I'm trying to support, lactation, whatever it is, that's all your diet. It doesn't have to be a
Yeah.
negative thing.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be.
It does have that, like, oh, you're dieting. It's like, no, I'm like kind of like this all the time. It's, like there's just times where you're maybe more tuned into, again, like that deficit phase, and you're saying no to a bit more of the temptation, or the hedonic type of foods. And
Right.
I mean, so then you've mentioned a bunch of different kind of things. What keeps you on track? I'm kind of curious. Like, what do you use in your toolbox for yourself?
So this is interesting because this comes back to what Seamus had said here a minute ago. With the kind of the TN approach. Um, I really, I'm a big believer in all things, not just the food. It's all about skills, right? Um,
Mm,
it's learning skills which become habitual. Um, So it's doing things, looking at everything. I look at everything from the perspective of this is skill acquisition. Whenever it's something
Mm,
new, I need to practice things to build the skills to help me achieve my goal. Whether it's fat loss, muscle gain, learning a language, learning a sport, right? Learning starting a new job. It's all about skill. So I look at everything as skill acquisition. And so, for me personally, uh, in the span of all the things that I've done, I had to start off eating mechanically first, and I think that gets a bad rap with especially with a lot of like the intuitive eating people, because I will intuitively eat an entire pizza. Um,
mhm.
so, so I
uh,
had, right, I had to learn how to eat mechanically first to help me kind of figure out and
what
understand.
do you mean? What do you mean mechanically, by the way?
So things like, okay, I eat breakfast between 8 and 10 a.m. And when I eat my
Mm,
breakfast, I'm eating roughly this amount of protein and this amount of carbohydrates and this amount of fat. Like I had to have some external kind of regulator to help me understand and be
mm,
mechanical about it, right? Where I wasn't relying on, am I really hungry? Am I really satisfied? Because if you take a person that has eaten randomly and haphazardly for a long time, those internal cues are misfiring and or broken. So having a
mm,
period of mechanical eating really makes sense for a lot of people. And that so when I hear the people like in the intuitive eating camp really hammering like, oh, diet culture, and it's like some people need this to be able to do what you're doing because that is a
mm,
skill that they
yeah,
don't have, right?
yeah,
So it's give them some structure and support. I needed that.
yeah.
Um, and then it helped me learn like, okay, what nourishes me, what works for me, what satisfies. I eat a pretty well-rounded diet. Like I eat, um, I eat a good portion. If we're doing the hand portions, I used to do a series. I did it for years, and I actually people have asked me to bring it back. In my Instagram stories, I would do like same but different, and I would show my meals, and I would show the hand portions, what they were. And so for me, every meal is like, I went through a period where I was only eating 2 or 3 times a day. Now I eat probably more like 4 or 5, just because of time and stuff and how active I stay. Um, but it was like when I was eating 3 meals a day, every meal was pretty much 2 portions of protein, 2 to 3 portions of carbohydrates, one, maybe 2 portions of fat, and a portion or two of veggies. And it
Yeah.
depended. Like if I was training hard in the morning, I might push my carbohydrates away and push the carbohydrates towards training and push the fat out, right? So I did a thing
Yeah.
where it was like keto at night for a while because I was like all of my carbohydrates are earlier in the day, and at night I would eat like protein, veggies, and fat. So that was
Yeah.
all my
Yeah.
fat. So
I
it's pretty much
yeah.
modular.
It's the approach.
Yeah.
It's literally, it's like you've adapted it to meet more of the demand of training demands and what feels right and is
Right.
quote
Yeah.
intuitive to the mechanics of your day, which if you never had something to create a basis with, you're not going to be able to adjust your
Right.
mechanics, right?
Right. And there
Yeah.
are periods where I go where I'm not measuring or managing any of that stuff, and it's quite a bit. But like I'm eating roughly the same amount anyway because now that is what is intuitive. I know like this is about as much food as I want, and I'll feel comfortable. And I know over the
Yeah.
course of the day, this is about as much food will help me support my performance because
Yeah.
I'm still very active.
Yeah.
So that's
I, I have a question on that because you hit on a word. I think people forget this, but it's skills acquisition skills. Obviously, you had to have other skills to eat mechanically, like to eat on those time. And I'll just preface with this, like for example, as a coach, when you work for a gym, you work for like coaching places, you're like, all right, we got this meal plan, we got these recipes, things like that. I tell this story to Marcus, but it's an extreme story. I coached a mom. She was like 37 years old, 2 kids. She was just recently pregnant, and she's 37 years old. I'm 20, I don't know, like 5 years ago. So I'm like young, still spry, like a few years into coaching. Um, and I'm like, yeah, this is your meal plan. This is what you're gonna eat. All this. And she's like, okay, well, like, what do you mean, like, eat this? Like, what do I do? How do I get this going? And I'm like, like, you gotta like go to the store, you gotta cook it and stuff. She's like, well, what do you mean cook? And I had to like, I've never, like, this is the moment where like I was like, thank God, like there was some level of grace or something from the world to go like, Seamus, like really understand what's going on here. And I was like, well, what do you mean? So I had to ask her. She's like, well, I've never really cooked in
yep.
my life before. I lived with my parents. I had the kids. They were always helping. And then when we got working, I was like, she was like, I travel a lot for work and I just like bought fast food. So like, this is what I'm coming to you for. Like, what do you mean cook? And I was like, I was stumped. I was
Yep.
stumped. And that was for the first time that I realized like, you can't just throw like a meal plan out. You can't just throw a plan out there. Without going deeper into skills. So like,
Yeah.
have you seen anything like that with like, for me, it was that
All the
situation
time.
was like about cooking.
All the time. All the time, right? So borrowing from Dan John, it's like the thing before the thing, right? It's always
Yeah.
like, so hey, we want you to eat this food and this food and this food. It's like, okay. And there's always like I ask a lot of questions in there to understand. Like I used to teach workshops, and I did a little segment in one of the workshops. It would be like we called it Teach an Alien. So pretend like some alien came from outer space, and you needed this space alien to eat 6 portions of protein a day. Think of all the questions that you'd have to understand and ask to be able to have that thing do that. You know what protein is. Where do you get it from? Do you know how to cook it? Do you just need to be raw? Does it need to be cooked? Like how much and all these things. So to your point, Seamus, yeah, it's like one of the things personally, I learned how to cook when I was at a young age because my dad worked a lot, so I had to fend for myself.
Yeah.
I always tell people this too. Home ec was probably back in the day that was probably the most useful class I ever took. I learned how to cook. I learned how to clean. I learned how to
Hmm.
sew. I learned how to balance a checkbook. So, I came into this with some skills of my own. But you do have clients that have never cooked and they don't know. So it's always asking them, it's like, okay, well, walk me through this. How are you going to do your breakfast? And they don't have to cook either. I'm not saying that. But if they
Yeah.
don't know how to cook or they don't know how to do stuff like that, they should at least still know how to be able to plan and understand where is that food going to come from.
Mm.
Am I going to buy it at the grocery store? Am I going to eat it at the restaurant? Am I going to do the takeout? Am someone else going to come and cook it for me? Do I know how to cook this? Do I want to learn how to cook this? And then that might actually be a whole nother skill that we work on as part, so people think food prep and they think of like bodybuilders planning, little, containers and filling the fridge and cooking all the food. It doesn't mean that. You don't have to know how to cook. You need to know how to plan and understand where's the food coming out from. So I being proactive, right? Um, that's like I love places like Chipotle because they're ubiquitous, right? You can find them anywhere, and regardless of what someone's goal is, they can go there and make a meal that works for them. So, right, got someone that's a plant-based eater, they can do that. I got someone that's trying to put on muscle, they can do that. I got someone that, only eats meat and vegetables, they can do that. I got someone that's trying to lose weight, they can do that, right? So I look at things like that and think like, what's the skill that they need to have, and they need to understand where the food's coming from and how much of what they want to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're calling about home ec. I was actually going to say that. Like, is this a result of the modern era where we've been so focused on developing students' technical skills in a AI driven world now, and we're losing a lot of these literally home skills that are literally where you're spending probably at least 8 hours, okay, maybe 4 hours of your night there, or 2 in the morning, 2 at night. You got 8 at work, or maybe you're even there even longer now because you're working from home. And
Yeah,
people are like, I'm gonna Uber Eats this to my house, and I've never even turned on the stove. Like, I don't even know how to heat a pan. You know,
Dude.
you might.
like yeah, yeah, you're not wrong. It's we've devalued being taking care of ourselves, and valued other things and convenience. And convenience is cool, but at the same time, uh, again, I'm a big believer, like you said, in skills. You should know how to take care of yourself. You should, at a minimum, know how to do some minimum things. Um, you know, I've had clients that didn't even know how to boil water, right? Like it sounds way out there, but it's like they've never had to do it. They just didn't know. So, it's like, hey, there's some basic things here that you can learn. You should be able to be self-sufficient, um, and take care of yourself. And again, for me personally, the way I grew up, I was forced to do these things because my father
Yeah.
worked a lot. I was alone a lot. I was born in the 70s and I grew up in the 80s, and like I was part of that generation that like we would just I would disappear. I lived in Arizona at the time, and I would just disappear in the desert all day, and I'd come home when the lights came on. This is probably about 10 o'clock at night there, right? And um, maybe the foods I was cooking for myself probably wasn't the best. It wasn't It'd be great to be eating like 3 grilled cheese sandwiches or like 2 pots of
Mhm.
macaroni and cheese. But at least I learned some things, right? And then as I got
Yeah.
older, when we moved back east, I would spend time with my grandmother because I liked it, and cooked with her. So I learned a lot of things from her, in that
Yeah.
space too.
The
No. Yeah. Go
the
ahead,
new
Marcos.
turnkey, or the latchkey kids, is that what they called it in that
Yeah.
generation? Like, the
Yeah,
where you just
yeah,
like you're literally just gone, that generation. Like,
yep,
it's funny how, like, we do feel some type of way as parents, at least me at 30 years old. I know you're a little older, Dom, but like, I'm like, man, like, I do this at the park now with my son. I let him just literally have as much autonomy and do whatever he wants while he's there, and not try to hold his hand. Because if an issue happens, whether it's a dispute or whether it is him hurting himself, he's gonna come find me. And I'm in proximity. You can see I'm always like, in eye line. But I'm wanting him to make those mistakes to learn. And he's like, the other
yep,
day, like, I actually missed it. He like scraped his eye like right here. And I was like, it must have not been bad enough because he didn't come find me. He didn't hurt himself. He was playing with some other
right.
kids and scraped it on a rock or a tree or something,
And
you
that's
know?
and
And
that's amazing. You're absolutely right. Now think about that and apply it to our clients, right? We
yeah,
have to let them go into a space where they're uncomfortable and try things on their own and maybe not do so well so they can learn, right? Like, oh, this didn't
mhm,
work. But that's what it is. It's learning. And that's why I always say it's a skill based skill acquisition and learning process to do any of this change. It's not like I did it or I succeeded or I failed. I'm learning, and part of the learning process is failure. So they
Mm,
have to fail at some things. They have to not be good at some things so that they can learn. You know what? That approach doesn't work for me. You know, I
Yeah.
can't. I don't have the time to cook every meal for myself. I'll cook maybe once or twice a week. But what I am going to learn is how to find other places. Right? I'm going to use this meal delivery service. I'm going to go. I'm going to go to the pre-prepared food section at the grocery store and pick up a couple of those, and because I planned out my meals for the week. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
failure is part of the
like
learning process.
I used to do that. I mean, there was a period of time in my coaching, amidst all the different phases of coaching, I would say like there's always been evolutions. And one of my arcs was like, let my client crash and burn kind of in week 1 and 2 so that they come with open questions on how to do things better. And it would
Yeah.
work maybe 50% of the time. Now I've learned like maybe this person I can't do that with. They need a little more structure, or us like doing what you just said, setting that intention with the mechanics of the day. And I'll be like, hey, this is generally a pitfall. Let's map this out together so they really, get that like vested rapport and value out of that like initial, I do like an initial call, then I have like an initial setup call. So there's a lot of interaction with people typically when I get them going one-on-one with me.
Cool.
And it's really back to what you said. It's like I know that we need to try to develop those things, and like you said, where is it coming from? Where are you sourcing it? Is it this? Are we using this to do a meal 3 because you don't want to cook that thing, but if you don't eat something there, you're snacking right before dinner and you're not getting to your outcome.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It's something that, I mean, progress looks a little, it's never linear. It's kind of like the weight loss trajectory trend where it's like just bouncing around, but like over time when you zoom out far enough, it looks like a straight line for so many people.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Right. Like the market. And
Yeah.
and sometimes the skill that they have to develop is learning, to lean into their support system. Right. So I've coached
Mm.
people. I had a couple of CEOs. They were not cooking for themselves. They had someone else do it. So I actually had to coach the person that was prepping the food for them about like how much.
Mm,
And they had to learn the portions, so they kind of knew, but it wasn't them that was doing the prep and all the planning. It was somebody else doing it for them, and that's okay too if they have that support system. So part of it is helping them learn, like, hey, you got to lean into these folks that are your support system. How do you have these conversations? How do you maybe educate them what you need, and what the base amount that they need to know so they can communicate that properly as well.
yeah. No, that you can't say anything better than that. Like I love when I get like a husband or a wife and coaching, and then they're like, I wish my wife would do this, or my husband. I was like, yes, please come, because then I could coach both of you. It makes my life easier. I think the worst for me is when dad is eating something else, mom is eating something else, and their kids is eating something else, and it's a whole like I'm cooking one meal, cooking another, and then I'm cooking a third. I had one client, I just like highlight her. She's so great. She's like, no, I'm the head of the household. I'm the one that cooks. Y'all are eating what I'm eating, and everyone was healthier for it, and she was the best. And she's
Yeah.
like, yeah, my kid was complaining, but I just shut him up, or whatever.
Yeah.
He's like, no, you got to eat this. Mom, it's mom. It the support system is so vital. I know Marcos says this, but he kind of said it like in one of our classes where it's like sometimes, in part of eating is so part of our life. We go out, whether it's in a weight loss journey or performance journey, it's like it's a Friday night, it's a Saturday night, whatever. And you're going out and then you're struggling and you go, man, like I'm doing everything my coach is asking me, but I'm still not shifting in that way. And then sometimes you have to kind of go look at yourself and go, is it my support system? Marcos didn't say it that nice. Didn't say it that nice. Or it's a little bit more brass than that. But is it, I would say sometimes, Marcos, you can finish the story if you want.
It was actually a breakout session, and I think it was in Jay's class, Dom, and I said something, and it like ruffled my participants' feathers on how I approached it. And it was like, well, like, I mean, are you looking at the people you're surrounding yourself with at the bar? Do you want to look like them? And she like got offended, even though it was the, fictitious conversation. But I mean, like, I'm gonna call a spade at this point in life sometimes too. And like, she's like, I would never have approached a client that way. I'm like, well, I would, because if they're not as serious as the people or like as the person that I'm working with, I'll probably fire that person in all honesty. Like that person to me is not, I'm not the right fit for them, unfortunately, because I want the outcome to happen. And they are doing behaviors in my eyes that I deem unacceptable at this point in time, unfortunately.
So there's also that line, though, right, where this is what I call the coaching paradox, right? If you really care about the person, and you care about the change that they are telling you that they want, you have to care less about it than they do. That's the coaching paradox. You have to care less than they do, right? Right. So if that person doesn't care, then you honestly can't care if you want them to be successful while working with you. You have to care less, and it's hard. It's not easy, right? Because we want
Yeah.
to push people, right? You're like, oh, I want you to do well, but it's like, I step back and really examine that. It's like, is that about me, or is that about them? Because if they don't care, why do I care?
It's a hard gamble because I think we got this from someone else recently. It's she was like a marketing genius. She's like, leadership, coaching, it's like it's accountability without enabling,
Yes.
or it's like it's empathy without enabling, but then
Yeah.
coaching is also empathy with accountability. So it's a, like you said, it's a fine line to toe where, a certain coach, kind of like Marcos, or a certain coach like that coach would say it this way. And I think, not everyone is exactly each other's cup of tea, or like, right? And I think that's something that people uh have on that upfront call, like, hey, this is my coaching style, you hired me for this reason, you
Huge,
like my media, you like these things, this is how I'm going to do it with you. Am I
huge,
okay to coach you like that,
huge, huge, huge. I think that gets missed by so many people, right? Like, before they even decide to work with you, meet with them and kind of go through, this is how I coach, this is why I coach this way, this is who I am, this is what it's like, this is what it is, and this is what it is not. If you like this, we can move forward. If you don't, well, maybe I can help you find a better option, right? Like, do that up front. That way you don't have to deal with it after they've hired you. Then it's like, like you knew, like, why are you not doing this, right? Then everybody's frustrated. They're mad at you. You're annoyed with them, and it's like, that's shouldn't be what this relationship is like. But I always like, I've learned this probably, I don't know, 10 years ago when I first started, when I was coaching the men's program at PN. Like, I had people that would on paper look like they didn't do anything. Like, it was like, this person, they didn't do anything in the program. They had a terrible, quote unquote, terrible year. And then you're like, send them a survey, like, how did it go, or how are you doing? And they're like, I'm ecstatic. I learned this, I did this, I did this, I did this. And it's like, on paper they didn't do anything. Right. So that was a big eye opener for me. And I always look at it and go, if the person is happy with how things are going, who am I to tell them that they shouldn't be happy with their limited progress? Because that's about me, not about them. Right. So if they're
Yeah.
there, they came in, they're like, I want to lose 20 pounds. And after 6 months, they've lost 1 pound, and you're like, they're not doing any of this stuff. But they're continuing to tell you that they're extremely happy with the relationship and how coaching is going. Who am I to tell them that they shouldn't be?
Yeah. I we probably need to take a a page from your book, because Marcos and I are very like so results driven that we sometimes forget. Yeah, you're right. That person could be having such a great experience. I think sometimes, though, the way, I don't know, I feel like maybe you've probably seen this, Dominic. It's just that coaching as a field, obviously that financial aspect of it is sometimes very much driven by the uh, results aspect as well. So it's like there is that give and take, right?
For sure. And I think, again, part of it comes back to like your client base and your audience and all that other stuff. So, you probably have people that's where they're at. I mean, I get results too. My clients want results. I just also understand that sometimes it might take time.
Yeah.
I've had people that have been with me for years. Like, one guy, he came through the PN program like 2 years in a row. And again, he was one of those people that like didn't do anything. And then it was like, he comes back a third year, and all of a sudden he just crushes it. Guy loses like 80 pounds, looks great, feels great, it changes his health, his whole thing, and it was like it took him 2 years to move all the other stuff out in his life out of the way before he could execute on the things that produce the results that people see. So it doesn't mean that they're not being successful. So it's always a measure of what is success. What are the results that we're looking for? And if I'm taking a skill-based approach, maybe the results I'm looking for are them learning some things to organize their life before they can actually do the things that will change their health and or physique.
Yeah.
That's
As you can see, we still have more PN courses to go through, more PN educationals, because I'm still very, like, as much as like every day I tell Marcos, I'm like, dude, I love the PN skills. I love that. Just to basically for the audience here is like, there's more ways to win than how's your progress photo, how's your macros today, and how's your weight loss, which to be quite honest has been like how the field has been. And now it's like you've got like a sleep course, like a stress recovery course. People are wearing Whoops and Auras, and you're talking about sleep, and you're talking about how their time with. So yeah, I'm still in the trenches of learning that.
And it's interesting because all these things touch each other. I had a friend of mine. I don't know. It's probably been 8 years now. He was a power lifter. He's a smaller guy. He's about 135 pounds. Very consistent. He owns a gym out in California. He trains regularly. Very strong. Very good power lifter. Takes care of his nutrition. Everything just that you would expect was dialed in, and he just was having a hard time with his physique. And we started talking, and it was kind of like, he had some young children at home. He wasn't sleeping. We really focused on his sleep. He didn't change anything else. Didn't change his training. Didn't change his diet. Changed nothing except for focused on getting better quality sleep. In a month, he looked like a different person. He lost a couple percentage points of body fat, put on like 5 pounds of muscle. He looked absolutely jacked. Did nothing but improve his sleep because everything else was perfect, right? So it was like sometimes it's something else.
Yeah. And I think again that's kind of the benefit of probably being thrown into those awkward situations with people you probably wouldn't normally collect as potential clients in the level 2, was the fact that I've actually learned a lot from that instance of like, okay, maybe I shouldn't say like you're around fat people like and you're trying to lose weight. Like, and explicitly, like, that was literally the goal that the person said, like, as the thing. So I'm like, you're out. Like, I just don't understand why this isn't computing, right? But just like you said, then I've moved it over into people I've actually am working with. And I've had a person that the first year is like, they developed a lot of the skills. It didn't on paper look like a ton of results, but year 2, oh my God. And now we're in year 3 and oh my God again. And there's new psychological challenges that we are facing. Like, I still want to get leaner. I'm like, girl, you're down 35 pounds. This is amazing. You're in a whole new set point. You should spend more time, overcoming the building and doing more things for the health and improving some other things. And just again, she's like, I'm going to put trust in it. And I'm also hearing in the tone of her voice, she's like, but I still need to prove to myself that I can get a little bit further right now going into this summer, because this is the best I've felt and looked, and I want to look even better. And I'm like, okay, we're going to focus on that again. We're going to adapt. And I think that skill of like actually listening better is something that really happened in that 20 weeks. Like, before I'd be like, no, I'm telling you, you should really do this. And now I'm like, who am I? Like, I got to care a little less about what I know might be best for long term, right in the moment, right? So that like we can get to that next phase again, maybe in another year. Like like why am I jumping a time horizon? Some arbitrary thing. It's really impactful to like be in those situations and like, and again, listening to you and listen to the care less moments, and and or when to be the empath, like listen and have the empathy there, but at the same time also again understand like what my role really should be for each individual person, because it does vary. And yeah.
I love that. I love that you're looking at it that way. And I think the thing that's important to highlight is empathy doesn't mean like not holding them accountable. It's not the same, but people conflate those things, right? They're like, oh, if you're too empathetic, you're like, they're not accountable. They're not going to do. No, I can be both empathetic and hold them accountable for the things that, they need to do. They're not the same thing. You can do both. And you need to do both if you want people to be successful. Sometimes it's just a matter of adjusting, right, the things that they expect to be able to do. You've heard me say this in class. It's like our job is to improve their say-do ratio. I want them to be able to do the things that they say they're going to do. If the person works 60 hours a week and has like 3 kids and 2 jobs and all the other things going on, I can't expect them to go to the gym 7 days a week for 2 hours, right? But they might expect that of themselves. And it's like, let's adjust this so that way you can do the things that you said. Because if they're trying to do that because they bought some workout from Instagram and that's what they said they needed to do, but they can't do it, they're going to feel like they're a failure. So it's like, well, what can you do here? Let's adjust to that, because that's how you're going to be successful. So I think that gets overlooked. Kind of coming back to the one client that you said, what really popped into my head, and it's something that you'll probably start noticing now that I say that here. Everybody's really good at losing weight, but people struggle with movement, right? Everyone can get into that weight loss mode, right? But they struggle with like maintaining, and that is a skill in itself. So again, it's like, how do we adjust the skills that you learn? It's right to be able to stay here for a little bit before we decide to put on muscle or lean out again or whatever it is. And that's an interesting conversation to have with people, letting them know, like, hey, this is a skill in itself. And actually, this part is harder for most people than it is to like lose the fat.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that. Like, that skill of maintenance. I have some clients and patients there, and it honestly, I feel like the biggest thing that I've had to adjust with them is I don't think I've really had to adjust the plan. Like, they're working out, they're eating, they're sleeping, like all those things. I feel like I've had to adjust them in terms of like their attitude to like the time horizon. Is that something you've noticed? Like, you notice that like you really have to like hold them back, like, hey, we're doing just fine, or like your data looks good, like everything looks good. Like, what are you trying to,
Setting expectations. So there's always, right, we have those formulas. We know kind of, right, what is a reasonable amount of fat loss or weight loss in amount of time? Like what is extreme? So it's always like, I like to do the math with those people and show them and say, okay, and change my language. So if I've got someone that's like, I want to lose, or I want to put 20 pounds of muscle on for my beach vacation in 4 months, right? And it's maybe a 20-year-old kid who's never lifted weights before. I might tell them, hey, this is actually a doable goal, but things are going to need to be meticulous. I don't know that we'll put exactly 20 pounds on, and then I speak what they really want. But we will have you looking buff and jacked for when you go on your vacation by that, right? So I'm setting expectations that might not hit that 20-pound thing, but we're going to have you really kind of feeling and looking the way you want, right? So same thing with the fat loss people. Hey, this amount of weight and this amount of time is doable. However, you're going to have to sacrifice a lot to get here, right? We might not hit that number. I'm very upfront with people. We may not hit that number, but we're going to have you looking good and fitting into this dress or whatever it is, pair of pants, whatever they're trying to do.
Oh yeah,
so you're absolutely right.
I think that too is like the again, like you just said, like knowing that part of the intake and understanding that, and the idea of struggling with maintenance is definitely, again, like I think a thing that we all, even as coaches, can struggle with at times. And it's like the hardest thing, honestly, it's the hardest thing for me. I know it's the hardest thing for Seamus, because it's like, all right, like I've been coasting here for a little while and life has just been a little bit more social, but I'm looking for the next thing. And I think that's just kind of, part of like human psychology as a whole. And again, I think too, reflecting back on that particular instance where the year 2 person was amazing. And the thing that she's like starting to like pull out of herself is saying just what you'd mentioned, like, but I have maintained this weight amidst X, Y, Z things over last 6 months. And I'm like, and you didn't regress. You didn't go back to old version of self. You've obviously hammered home the skills to a level that they're habitual. Your morning routine, you cue things up just so much better, right? Like, and I think that's part of it is like people lose it and they're afraid that they will derail themselves if they don't have, have it go further and go above and beyond it.
Right,
It sucks and it's kind of sad because I know it happens to all of us. And, it's like, when is enough enough? And it's
right,
unfortunate that I think that, um, yeah, like even for me, my most recent win is a client that we started at 87 kilos for Olympic weightlifting, and she lifted in the 71 kilo class this last weekend. And
nice.
again, like that, her big goal was to at least just get to 77 or 76, or whatever the, kilo equivalent was. And then she's like, I think I could push it further. I think I could push it further. And
Wow.
I was like, because what's funny? Her strength was still going up. She felt amazing. Her positions, her body was recovering well, even though she was slowly, it's probably going through more of like a compositional shift in all honesty, because she finally had other things in order that can often be overlooked that are, like her gut health was something that she didn't realize how bad it really was until she's gotten to this new place. And she's like, my stomach has never bothered me. I can work in XYZ foods that I couldn't have before without suffering for days afterwards. And it's amazing that, like, as much as, like, again, I'm going to always say, like, you got to do the basics really well first, that some of the little nuanced things are kind of what are part of the fun in quote unquote a maintenance phase, or when you're kind of maintaining a particular weight. It doesn't mean you, just because you got there with one particular set of rules, macros, whatever, doesn't mean you couldn't have done some things better, like incorporating vegetables to your plate, or looking at, again, like you said, the sleep, or other things subjectively. You don't even need the Aura Ring or other monitoring tools. And honestly, I'm a data driven guy, but I hate data tools sometimes because people get so into the weeds. And I'm like, you ain't gonna change anything. Why are you even bothering? My wife does this all the time. She's like,
I don't
I
do
went to my
anything with
cardio.
it.
What? She's like, I went to my cardiologist. He says I need to wear this heart rate monitor for 7 days. Like, what's going to change? What are you going to do differently? Nothing. I'm like, okay, so like, you're not going to get on a drug to fix your whatever potential arrhythmia. Why are you going to bring more stress into your life? She's like, I just need to know that I'm okay and I can just leave it behind me. I was like, will you though?
Yeah, that's very true, right? Like wearables and all this stuff. Roman's like, oh, I got all the data. I'm like, are you doing anything with it? What are you doing with it? Nothing. And in most cases, the answer is nothing. It just
Yeah.
feels good, right? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I
No, I
it,
mean, we live in a data driven, Marcos and I work in a data driven company and assessment driven company. And like our patients are that executive type where they're like, oh, well, I've heard of this test. I listened to this podcast and I want to do this test. And it's like, even the doctors say it. They're like, no, I push back on some of that because it's like, we got their labs, we got this. And there really isn't a point to the test. Maybe it was just really marketed well to them. Like, for example, Kim K last year did the Prenuvo. Everybody wanted the Prenuvo. And it's like, well, what was the point of that assessment for you? Yeah, for maybe a certain amount of people, they found something. But even then, the interpretation said, like, you got nothing. So it's like, are you paying for something and then just creating more anxiety just because you want to get a test? And it's like, are you testing for testing's sake? Like, what are we really doing here?
exactly, right? We gotta have a purpose. Always have come back to it. What is the purpose of what we're doing? And I'm very much a I'm not looking for the right word, not a minimalist. I want to be efficient, right? I want to do the least amount and get the most out of it. And I work with clients like that too. I try to change the least amount for them and squeeze the most out of it before we start adjusting stuff, right? Like why? Especially if like I think a great example, especially probably for your client base, is when you talk about fat loss. Like I'm not ripping massive amounts of food away from people. I'm not making massive macro adjustments. I'll make tiny ones. Like just get close to that because I want to get the most out of the least amount possible. Right.
Yeah.
And that takes
minimum
people to be
effective
patient
dose.
sometimes. Yeah, you got to play the long
Mhm.
game. I think that's another important thing. That was something that made a
Yeah.
big difference for me in my personal journey. I didn't say I needed to lose a certain amount of weight. I didn't say I was going to do. It was like I'm going to do these behaviors to the best of my ability for a year. That's what I told myself. Like because I had a
Yeah.
friend that was very similar to me that had done the same kind of program, and he'd lost like 100 pounds. And, you know, he was like a poster boy for a certain brand of at home workouts that was very, very popular in the 2010s. Like, and it was like, all right, he can do it, I can do it. And then it was like, all right, what did he do? And it's like, he just showed up every day for a year. So that's what I said to myself, and that's what I did. And that's how I play what I try to do with my clients. Like, well, I'll pay attention to the other stuff, and yeah, we'll track things. But more importantly, the number one goal should be, I want you to show up a year from now. Do the best you can every single day for a year. Some days it's going to look great. Some days it doesn't. I have stacks of composition notebooks that, like, you know, because I kept track of all my notes and my workouts and everything. And it was like something, right? Just like, it was like, workout was terrible. I was hungover, right? So I have those notes in my book, you know.
Yeah.
It was like super hungry, had a couple of pieces of pizza. But like, they became few and far between. But the fact is, even that was in there, I didn't not do what I said I was going to do. Right? It wasn't always great, but I showed up to the best of my ability every single day
I
over the
love
course
that.
of a year.
I just want to touch on that. I want to. That's so on brand with PN, is having like a journal of yourself. Because precision nutrition, like, I remember doing PN1 like years ago, and they're like, "Here's a journal that you made." Like, they emailed me the whole thing, and it's like all your notes, and it's like that's who you were in that last year. And
Right.
I think the importance of, I know we're talking about data, but like not necessarily data, but just the journaling aspect of it. You know, Marcos and I, we made a journal for the macro perspective, and it's like, what are the things you did? Like, what were you grateful for? Like all this, and it's like, it when you review it back, you can look back and you're like, wow, yeah, there were these things that was a behavior, and when I journaled about it, you know, it just changed. So it's like, just to speak on that is so powerful. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's still data, right? It's self data. It's thing, and there's things in there that you can, you know, you can operationalize. So even the subjective data, you can operationalize, and I think it's important to do that in a lot of cases. And that's another thing that gets missed, right? When you're working with people, it's like, I want to feel better. All right, let's operationalize that. How are we going to rate
Mm,
feel better? Right? Are we going to do a
mm,
little scale? And the example I give is, think about the doctor's office when you go in there and you see that little smiley face chart that they give you for
Mhm.
pain. That is an
Yes.
operationalization operationalization of a subjective feeling, pain,
yeah,
right? And it works,
Hmm.
because if you,
yeah,
whatever it is, if you're using the same thing over and over again, now you can start seeing, you know, am I waking up refreshed? Right? I'm giving, maybe my goal is to be a 4 on a scale of 5 every morning of how I feel refreshed. And you define the 1 as like, I don't want to get out of bed. 5 is like, I'm ready to, like, I can get out and run around and be happy. Right? So every day it's like, just having track. How do you feel? How do you feel? How do you feel? Now I can start seeing what's the trend.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's
And
awesome.
and speaking to that as we wrap this up, like it's funny because sometimes we break into certain things in life, I've come to find, that you may be too young for, right? So ironically, like in front of me, I have DEXA scans. One of them is from one of our machines in Vegas, and then the physician here in Houston that I'm covering for today um, did a scan on the machine here because it's a newer one, has some other stuff that gets the visceral tissue or visceral adipose tissue, and he's like, my body fat percentage is like 7% difference. And I was like telling, and he was like, and I was like, okay, well, let's take a step back there. We already know these are two separate machines. You know, there's calibration differences, and you know, this one has a different software. Maybe there's something going on. Like, I just try to even like calm him down. I was like, you don't gain 7% body fat. And but then I also look back. The first scan I ever did was like 8 years ago, which kind of is a starting journal point of this health data that most people wish that they could have. And I'm actually like reflecting on that right now, thinking like, how lucky am I to have been able to have the opportunity to do a scan that generally is like $150 per person 8 years ago, that gives me like quote unquote a benchmark. And I remember exactly what I was doing at that time. I didn't journal any of this down, but I know what I was doing in 2016 at that time. I was getting ready for CrossFit regionals. this was me eating like 4,500, 5,000 calories a day and being in single digit body fat percentage. And it's like, we can call it the North Star, right? Like, this is something that I will never be able to replicate in my adult life with 2 kids. But it'd be cool. It'd be cool to be somewhere in that ballpark. And the real big difference that I've learned is like, whoa, like that activity, college student, no kids, no stressor, good sleep, all those things that were stacking up wins, like we've talked about today, in addition to understanding or getting a very beginner's education in nutritional understanding, was so impactful then, have this thing to look back on. And like, it's funny because it only ever shows like the first date you ever did, Dom, and then all like within 5 of the most recent ones. And each one of those things tell a story. Why was I scanning so frequently here for whatever, every 2 weeks or whatever? I was trying to do something. And it's funny because I even told Seamus, it's like, I went like 3 years. I went like, no, yeah, I literally went 3 years between scans. I can see it right here from 2021 to 2024 because I started realizing I was getting fixated on stuff that didn't even matter. I felt good. My training was going well. Why do I need this number to qualify what I'm trying to focus on right now?
Right.
And I took a step back, and again I was like, oh, I didn't journal for a while, but it's okay because you can always go back to it at some point as long as you keep things consistent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's funny. You get the thing as you started telling the story, one of the things that popped into my head was like the difference between accuracy and precision, right?
Exactly.
Both of right, one of those machines is more likely more precise than the other one, but because or more accurate than the other one, but because you use 2 different machines, right? It wasn't precise, right? So if you're using a scale that's 8 pounds off, but you use it every single day in the same exact way in the same exact time, right? Now you have precision. It might not be accurate,
Mm-hmm.
but I can make adjustments because it's been precise over time, right? So
Yeah.
that was the first thing that popped into my head because we see those people that they get on the scale like randomly at random times. It's like, oh, I got on the scale today and I'm 10 pounds heavier than I was last time. Like, is it the same condition? Probably
Yes,
not,
right.
right? Like you stepped on the scale. You stepped on the scale the day after your birthday party, and you ate cake, and you had a couple of beverages, and you went out with your family, and you didn't get good sleep, and you didn't drink the same amount of water that you normally eat. Yeah, guess what? You're gonna be different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're like, oh,
Yeah,
I gained
and
10
that's
pounds of fat. And it's like, no, you didn't.
no, you have a different instrument, and it's totally fine, like,
Right.
because and I think that's like what I always tell patients, clients, whatever tool you're sticking with, even with tracking your food, like if you picked strawberries and that was the thing you chose 8 years ago, just use the same one, because it doesn't matter if it's 2 or 3 grams off. At least it's, like you said, it has accuracy for you. It may not be as precise as it could be, but again,
Yeah.
like I tell people, like trying to constantly clean up things up because of updates that people's macros might look like, you're gonna go into the weeds, and like it's not
Yeah.
worth it. It's not worth stressing over that little bit.
Exactly. Dom, we're just right over an hour. I want to be respectful of your time. I know we're locked in. I want to make sure you get to hang with your kiddos there. Anything we can kind of finalize? Like, what are some things you're kind of excited about with, whether it's your lifestyle in fitness nutrition, or PN fitness nutrition, or just kind of overall the overall field? We can kind of close off on, and where can people find you?
Yeah, man. People can find me on Instagram, dmatteo77. I'm on Twitter, X, or whatever, but I don't use that very often. Find me on Facebook too, but Instagram is usually where I have more of these kind of conversations. What am I excited about? I'm just I like. I'm excited. We're starting a new cohort starting in our level 2. I'm happy to see the industry kind of expanding to say more of like health coaching too, right? Understanding that it's more than just food in a silo. Relationships and exercise and our like our work and all these other things in how we're able to execute some of these things. So um, seeing that now there's like the board certification, which we prep people for, and in America, seeing that you have that board certification, it's opening doors. There are companies that are looking for people that have this kind of certification to do this kind of coaching. If you don't, not everybody's a business person, right? Not everybody wants to work for themselves. Some people want to show up and do coaching and make a decent wage, but don't want to deal with the marketing. They don't want to deal with all this stuff. So I think this is a cool thing that it's expanded and these opportunities are there for people. That's, for me, I think that's across the board, right? Because more people need basic stuff. Not everybody needs to do all the really in-depth stuff. There are clients that do need to micromanage them a little bit more. And there's people that do that, like yourself. But there's also opportunity for people that maybe aren't there yet. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Marcos, anything else? I'll close this out, man.
No, Dom, just thanks for your time. Thanks for the insight in terms of like, again, what we felt like we gained so much from. So we're happy to expose people to like those isms, the little things that make you your unique self in a great way. Because again, it's stuff that Seamus and I learned a ton and look to apply regularly. And like your excitement with that like board certification also was something that we're really excited about too. And once we told our company as well, we're like, hey, that's actually a great moniker for all of our performance health coaches, because now as board certified performance health coaches, there's like, it has a ring to it, right? It can differentiate you inside of our organization, which again, we want people to know, hey, like we're looking at this from a holistic lens and not just here's your workout plan. Back in the day, here's your growth hormone, here's your testosterone. People understand that we're an adaptable company with our Synergenics organization, and while we do coach people one-to-one on the side as well, we want to be able to again show people we're more than just counting numbers, and looking at that, that data sets.
Right. If you want the exogenous help to actually really work really, really well, take care of the other stuff on top of it, right? Like
it's not a silver bullet. We tell their patients that all the time. Like you literally would get these things and they will still not work, because we've seen clinical evidence over 25 years where people don't improve or get an outcome that because they're not looking at some of the basic stuff like you just said.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest example of that, and I'll close out, is like I had a couple come in, they're like, Seamus, it's been 6 weeks. We've had the semaglutide. How come we don't look like models? And they asked that seriously. And I literally was like, no, they literally had a complaint with the physician and me. And I was like, well, let's go over what you did for your workouts, your sleep, your nutrition, and just kind of like your water and everything. And they're like, no, Seamus, we just took this and we wanted things to change. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's like not all of it.
Semaglutide to make it easier to be able to practice the things, to build the skills that get them there. Like that's
exactly. Exactly. Like, why aren't we models yet? And they asked like 2 times, not just me, but like with other people. And I was like, no, we really need to harness these areas, and then you will start getting there. Like it's not a quick fix as most people will think.
Oh man.
But yeah.
No.
But yeah, anyways, Dominic, thanks so much for being on, man.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I was telling Tony this, like the PN2 level 2 is definitely it's a course of its own, and it really stands above for a lot of folks, a lot of great people. I know Marcos and I are coming out of here, but I know some greats, like I know we mentioned other people like Dan Gardner, who have become some of the best coaches in the world, for like who's been on Joe Rogan. He's also been with Sean O'Malley, and we're gonna get him on this pod soon. But it just comes to show, like, this, you guys have created something so great that the foundation is there to create something for yourself as an individual. So for those listening, think about this as, if you're a coach or nutrition, whatever it is, think about PN, go into them. They have great people like Dom, Tony, Jay, all these guys. And then now getting that qualification of the board certification is exciting, because now you can really distinguish yourself. But with that being said, Dom, thank you so much for your time. And for those listening, just comment below, let us know what you like, and we'll see you guys later. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot. Have a good one, guys.
Bye.